Hey friends, welcome back to Guess What? Compliance can be simple. I'm your host, Dr. Natasha Guess, and if you're new here, welcome. If you've been listening for a while, thank you so much for joining me. This podcast, it exists because I believe compliance shouldn't feel overwhelming. My goal is to help healthcare leaders make compliance simple, practical, and just a part of how their practices functions every single day. Now, today's episode starts with one simple question. Could this happen in your practice? And as you know, every week we look at real healthcare enforcement actions. And it's not to pile on another organization or practice, but to actually understand what happened, what regulators found, and what we can learn before the same thing shows up somewhere else. Now, I have a simple question for you today. Are all of your clinicians properly licensed? And most practices would probably say yes. But let me ask it differently. When was the last time somebody actually checked and verified that information? Because hiring someone with an active license doesn't mean that license stays active forever. Now let's talk about a case that was in the news. In June 2026, Residential Home Health, they self-disclosed to HHS OIG that they had submitted claims to federal healthcare programs for services provided by a nurse who did not hold a valid license during that relevant time period. The matter resulted in a civil monetary penalty settlement of approximately $379,000. This was self-disclosure and settlement, not an adjudicated finding of liability. But the operational lesson is very important. At some point, there was a gap between the individual's ability to provide licensed services and the organization's process for catching it. Here's something that might surprise you. Residential home health isn't an outlier. It's part of a pattern that shows up again and again in OIG's self-disclosure records, specifically inside home health and home care. Avail Home Health Services in Texas self-disclosed and paid over $57,000 for claims tied to an unlicensed nurse. Central Home Healthcare in Georgia paid about $29,000 for the same underlying issue. Then we have Ability Plus Home Healthcare in Michigan. They paid over $47,000 because a nurse's license had lapsed. Then Always Home Nursing Services in California paid nearly $282,000, not for an unlicensed employee, but for someone who was actually excluded from federal healthcare programs entirely. Different states, different agencies, different dollar amounts. Same root cause every single time. Somebody's credential status changed and nobody's process caught it before claims went out the door. That's not a coincidence. That's an entire category of risk that home health and home care organizations or practices keep running into, because credential monitoring often lives in someone's memory instead of in a system. I do want to draw a distinction here because it matters. An unlicensed nurse and an excluded individual are two different problems, and they require two different checks. A license lapses because someone forgot to renew it, or a renewal got delayed, or a state board processed it late. That's a state license and board issue, and you check it there. An exclusion is different. It means someone has actually been barred from participating in federal healthcare programs at all. Usually because of a prior fraud finding, patient abuse, or a criminal conviction. That status lives in a completely separate federal database, the HHS OIG list of excluded individuals and entities, called the LEIE. Now, a practice can be diligent about license renewals and still miss an exclusion because it's a different list, checked in a different place for a different reason. Always Home Nursing's case is exactly that scenario. And most practice I talk to check licenses. Far fewer are checking the exclusion list on any kind of regular schedule. Now, let's talk about that self-disclosure path for a minute, because I think it's one of the most underused tools available to small practices. If OIG discovers a problem like this on their own, through an audit or an investigation, you're dealing with a government-directed process. That usually means a longer timeline, less control over the outcome, and penalties calculated without much benefit of the doubt. Now, if you find a problem yourself and you use OIG's provider self-disclosure protocol, the dynamic changes. You're the one bringing the issue forward. You control the timeline of when you report it, and OIG has consistently resolved self-disclosed unlicensed provider cases in the tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes under 100,000 rather than what a full government investigation into the same conduct could produce. None of that works, though, if you never find the problem in the first place. Self-disclosure only helps you if your monitoring system actually surfaces the issue. That's the piece that has to come first. Licensure verification cannot live only in your hiring process. Licenses expire, renewals happen, status can change. And if your entire system is, we checked when we hired them, you don't really have ongoing credential monitoring. You have an onboarding checklist, and those are not the same thing. And I know you're saying, well, could this happen in my practice? So I'll ask you this question. When does every clinician's license expire? Who tracks those dates? How far in advance do they receive reminders? Who independently verifies renewal? And what happens if verification doesn't occur by the deadline? Could you answer me without searching through emails and personnel files? That's what operational compliance looks like. It isn't knowing that licenses are important. Everyone knows that. It's having a system that makes it difficult for an expired license to quietly slip through. Now, the operational lesson from this case is that you need to create a centralized credential and licensure tracker for every applicable workforce member. Track at a minimum license or credential, issuing authority, expiration date, verification date, person responsible for monitoring, renewal status, and escalation if renewal isn't verified. The system should tell you a problem is coming before someone continues providing services with a credential you haven't verified. Now, your step for this week is choose 5 licensed or credentialed people in your practice, Independently verify your current status, then compare what you find with what your internal records say. And if those records don't match up, or you don't have a centralized place to check, you just found something to fix. I know that having to do all of these on top of every other hat you're wearing can be difficult, but it is important. And credentialing isn't something you complete once when someone joins the team. It's something you have to keep operational. Now, keep it simple, stay compliant, and protect your patients. If today's episode changed how you're thinking about credentialing, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another healthcare provider or leader. And if you're wondering whether your own practice has operational compliance gaps, the Compliance Confidence Assessment was built to help you find them before they turn into audit findings, enforcement actions, or costly disruptions. You'll get a personalized compliance risk score and a detailed action plan to help you strengthen your compliance operations before regulators find the gaps for you. You'll find the link in the show notes. Remember, what regulators find tomorrow is usually decided by the operational choices leaders make today. I'm Dr. Natasha Guess, and thank you for listening to Guess What? Compliance can be simple. I'll see you next week.